Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're doing another installment of Troubleshoot My Anthurium, which I think is now the fourth episode in this little mini series. This is where people send in photos of plants that are showing some problems, and I take a crack at trying to diagnose what the issue might be and just offer up what I would personally do in that situation. I'll be honest, I don't know why people want me to do this. This is probably my most requested video series, but it probably has to do with the fact that I see my fair share of problems and maybe I can draw my experience, but that is literally it. I do not have some sort of beautiful scientific mind that can tell you chemically what's going on with the plants. I guess this is just a safe and non-judgmental space for people to submit their issues and get kind of like a community-based opinion on what their plant might be going through and what might be able to fix it. So if you have a different opinion on any of these submissions and what the issue might be, feel free to chime in the comments. One thing I've found as time goes on, that these submissions are getting progressively more difficult, and I can only guess that it's because everything I know I've already put on my channel. Like, I'm not holding back anything from you guys of what I know. So what I know, if you watch my videos, you probably already know. So people are submitting things that, I'm just looking at my computer right now. I'm not even entirely sure what's going on. But because we are long overdue for one of these videos, I'm going to do my best in figuring out what I would do in your situation. But I'm gonna move over here so I can put any relevant photos and stuff over on this side. Okay, I'm gonna start with a relatively easy one, but it's one that I've had problems very publicly. And if you know, you know. This one is a politum. So with each one, I'm gonna just kind of summarize what they told me about the plant, what the problem appears to be, and how they're taking care of it. Sometimes I'll have some back and forth questions and just clarify a few things, but this person said, "Today I checked my baby politum and I noticed brown roots throughout the frosted pot. I got it out, it was still in the mix I got it in. Some roots were mushy, but also the bottom section of the stem. I chopped off the squishy roots and the stem up to a firm section, gave it a wash, and repot into a fresh airier mix. I put it a little deeper to try to get some aerial roots to go into the substrate. But I'm still really worried about it, as I absolutely love this little guy. The stem from under the soil is yellow, as you can see. The part left is still firm, but is it supposed to be yellow or will it continue to rot?" So the very bottom of the stem, where I assume all the roots were yellow. So this part was cut off, leaving very little root left on the stem. A little bit is still yellow, and then anything above the substrate is green. There's some green aerial roots near to the apical growth point, and then one little white root that was underneath the substrate. So I'm really happy to be able to reassure you that everything is going to be fine. Politiflorum is one of the easiest anthurium to root. I've rooted multiple politiflorum from scratch, as in with zero roots whatsoever, multiple different specimens, and it's never failed. So first of all, I'll address the yellow part of the stem. That's absolutely fine. It's only because it's below the soil line. It's not getting any light. If you were to expose that to light, and like, let's say if you were gonna lay that whole plant sideways, stem will turn green. But the way that they've potted it to bury more of the aerial roots and more of the stem is exactly what I would do. So I will say, here are the different ways I've rooted politiflorum to varying degrees of speed, but it's always worked. So the first time I ever imported politiflorum was in 2020. Might have been early 2021, I don't really remember, but the demand was so high with these Ecuadorian exporters like Ecuagenera and Tropicals that they were just chopping up plants and sending them without roots. They will say no roots or like lightly rooted on the order form. So you're going with it with the knowledge that it doesn't have roots. So I was so desperate for a politiflorum that I bought one without roots. It came to me, I think it was like a 2-leafer. Maybe like the leaves were about, this is really similar size to this one, maybe a little bit smaller. At that time, I was very heavy into sphagnum moss, so I potted into moss in a little pot into a fully enclosed bin, not even cracked open. It was super high humidity. It rooted within a week. Like, I was seeing roots on the side of the pot within 1 week. Years later, I had to reroot that same plant when on camera I was repotting it and I was trying to get it out of a no drainage glass vessel. And obviously I can't squeeze a glass vessel. So I was trying to pull it out of the pot and I broke the top of the plant straight off and it had no roots on it. So I put it into tree fern. It might have been amended with like perlite and pond or something, but it was mainly tree fern. And I stuck it into my tent. So it was in like nice, bright, warm, humid conditions. And I just like left it there. It did, I think, wither off the the newest leaf, possibly. I don't really remember, but the apical growth point did not die off. So it just took a few months to root out into the substrate. I've been growing it in very subpar conditions, but it's just put out a pretty massive leaf. It took a while to get going from there, but it didn't really get set back. And then the third time I rooted a politiflorum was my narrow pally. Because it crawls over the side of the pot, it was getting really heavy on one side, and I was looking at it one day and I was realizing that it's probably time to repot it because the leaves were getting so big. It was touching the floor from this shelf. And then one night it just crashed to the floor. The top of the plant broke off. Trying to remember. No, it had 0 roots on the top part of the stem. So that one I was admittedly much more lazy with. I think that was right before I went away on holiday. So I stuck it into a vase of water and put it into a place where it gets some natural light, not any special amount of light, no grow lights or anything. There was no added humidity. And over time, this is the slowest method. It did root. It had rooted out from one part of the stem, and that root has forked off into a million different directions. So the root ball is about this big. It's still in water. I didn't get around to do anything with it, mainly because I don't know where I'm going to put it. So I'm here to say that your pally is going to be absolutely fine. I would, just to ease your concern, put it into somewhere warmer, especially now that we're into winter. I assume that you're in somewhere that feels winter cold, and I would put it somewhere more humid just to speed up the rooting process. You don't necessarily need to put it into 100% humidity, just maybe like a tent or a meal bowl cabinet or maybe a bin that is cracked open. It doesn't need to be fully sealed because you're probably also concerned about that stem rot and the root rot. So don't let the substrate be really wet because there's not a lot of roots to take up that water. And if you can, just tuck those aerial roots deeper into the soil, and then I would just leave it and make sure that the existing leaves are not getting wrinkly or like yellowing off at an alarming pace. You might see some yellow off because it has just lost its whole root system and it's been cut. Other than that, your plant is going to be absolutely fine. Okay, this next one is interesting because it's actually a propagation of one of my plants. It was healthy when I sold it, but this is a long time ago. I think it was somewhere between 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I sold the propagation of my contaminated Carla, or the open pollinated Carla from NSC Tropicals. It's one of my favorite plants. It's right here. This is, I think, the only prop I've ever sold. So she's asking, I have a prop of your dirty Carla. I nearly killed her, but have brought her back now. The older leaves have been getting this spotting mostly on the back. As the leaf gets older, eventually you can see the spotting on the front as well, a yellow-orange color. My routine, usually watering twice weekly. This varies slightly depending on the season. I fertilize with Dynagrow about once a week and CalMag once every few weeks. Roots look good and new leaves come out looking great. I can't seem to keep more than one nice looking leaf on it. So there's this picture on the back with these very kind of raised orangey spots and bumps. And then it starts to show a little bit on the margins of the front of the leaf. And then on the petiole, there's these scars that look like scale, but I zoomed in and it doesn't appear to be scale. It looks to be kind of blisters that harden over. And then the front of the emergent leaf, which looks so good. I'm going to show you my plant as a comparison. I know I definitely have not had this issue on my mother plant, this is the only one that I'm growing right now. I don't have any other props. So here's a fully hardened leaf. Here is the newest leaf. This has always grown in my tent ever since I got it. And before I got it from my friend Jose, he grew in his tent in pond, I want to say. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was pond. And I moved it into tree fern soil and has been living in some variation of tree fern soil ever since. And then her prop, she has been growing it in a mix of tree fern. It's a chunky mix, she says. I don't have a picture of the actual mix. A chunky mix of tree fern, orchid bark, perlite, vermiculite, and small leca pebbles. It gets 14 hours of full spectrum light. And I asked to clarify the amount of Dynagrow it's getting. So it's about a capful of Dynagrow. Dynagrow Foliage Pro caps are quite small, and it's a capful in a 4-liter watering container. And then when she does CalMag, it's a capful into 4 liters, so it's not a lot. So that kind of rules out fertilizer burn for me. It's also living in ambient condition. Humidity in the house fluctuates between 55 and 75% would be her guess, but I don't know if she has an actual hygrometer to measure. So back to this spotty leaf. I will say I've never had anything quite like that. I want to say it really does look fungal to me. I have this on the older leaf. I don't know if you can see, there's very faint speckles. You probably can see it down here. It doesn't look quite the same symptoms. And this I thought to be possibly a mite issue that's happening in my tent. And before I left on holiday, I sprayed everything down front and back and wiped it with permethrin. I did that on video. So if you watch that, you'll know that everything was sprayed down with which one was it? This spray, which is Dr. Doom Go Green Botanics Indoor Plant Spray. It's supposed to target mites. I don't know how useful this recap is because I don't think this is the same issue. Personally, I think that it's a fungal issue. I don't know what it would be stemming from. I would say, because my thought is that it's fungal, I would take the whole plant out of the substrate, roots and everything, and that would be my chance to just double check the roots. And I would try to treat the whole thing with something antifungal. So depending on how aggressive you want to be, I would do either on the aggressive side an antifungal soak. So like your Physan 20, your Phyton 35, or copper fungicide, and then wash everything off and pot it into a clean substrate. I might do something completely inorganic too, just to kind of rule out what might be in the substrate before. Like I just don't want to put it back into the same substrate. I might even cut off those old spotty leaves just to be sure and keep that one really nice one and see if it can hold on to that new leaf once the next leaf comes in. Maybe a gentler treatment would be to, again, get it out of the pot, out of the substrate, and wash every nook and cranny of the plant with something gentle like a Castile soap, and then repot it again into a more or less sterile substrate and see how things progress from there. This is one of the ones that is kind of stumping me because it's a plant that I personally have history with, and I've been growing this plant for coming up to a couple of years now. And I've never had this particular issue. She's also growing it in ambient, so plenty of airflow. So it's a little bit stumping to me. If you've seen this particular damage on your plants, please let me know if you've been able to find anything out about it, because I'm not 100% sure. And then finally, what I would do after, like depending on what treatment you go, if you do the soap thing, then you can probably inoculate it with mycorrhizal inoculant right away. If you do the antifungal, especially like the Phyton, which is systemic, I would hold off on inoculating for at least 3 or 4 weeks, and then I would inoculate after, just so you're not wasting the myco. And I'm not even 100% sure if Phyton kills myco, but there's that chance. So I wouldn't necessarily waste it. I would just let it kind of reestablish itself. Most of my anthurium have lived at least a part of their lives inside of this grow tent, which does not have any fans. And the only airflow it gets is when I open up the door to the tent. And fungal issues have never been a continuous problem for me, and I've always attributed that to the use of mycorrhizal inoculants. And there's a lot of organic media in here. It gets pretty humid and muggy in there, especially in the summer and especially after watering day. And it's never been a huge problem for me, and I want to say it's because of myco, but obviously I can't say that for sure because I don't know enough about this stuff. But I put a lot of trust in myco to battle root rot problems and things like that for me. So that would be my course of action. Okay, this next one is a plant from Charmaine. She asked me to help grow Charmaine's narrow pally seedling. So she was selling selflings of her narrow pally. I'll put a photo of the pally here. She's been selling them, oh my goodness, how long she's been selling them for? Maybe since earlier this year, the beginning of this year, something like that. So this is a seedling in question. It's grown in a cabinet, 78% humidity, watered when dry, and I do tell it it's a stupid asshole daily. And I asked what's wrong with it because it looks totally fine to me. And she said it won't grow. It has 4 leaves, and it was 2 leaves when she got it. So I think the issue is that it's growing really slowly for her, not putting out leaves as quickly as other plants. That pot is a drainage pot, and it's in a mixture of tree fern and soil. I was asking if she'd ever grown pendant leaf, strap leaf anthurium from seed before, and she said no, because they're all garbage trash. So let me show you. I don't have a plant from this seed batch, but I do have a Wenlingeri that would probably be around the same age. So this is from my dear friend Owen. This is one of his Anton Valley selves that he was starting to sell round about almost like a year ago today. And you can see it's a very small. I had two. He had sent two to me, two to Charmaine. I ended up sending one of these to a subscriber who wanted a Wenlingeri because I don't need so many Wenlingeri and I have this one. So this was so frustrating to me because it was taking forever. It was looking like alfalfa sprouts for the longest time. So minus these three leaves, it was looking like this for ages. And it was living inside a fully enclosed cup in tree fern, like a tree fern perlite mix. I'm pretty sure there's no pond in here. And it started to get going a lot quicker when I took it out of that little cup and I just put it into a bin. So a little bit more airflow and even less light. I don't think the light had anything to do with it. It was just like the airflow. And I did attribute the increased growth rate to airflow, but at the same time, I was forgetting that these strapleaf anthurium take forever when they're babies. Like when you're talking about a heartleaf, velvet leaf anthurium, they start to size up so much quicker and they just get a little bit beefier much quicker than these strap leaves. Wenlingeri, politiflorum, they're both gonna be like this size for what seems like ages. And then before you know it, they're drilling holes in their floor because they're getting so long so quickly. So I've been told, and this is the only strap leaf, this is the only pendant leaf anthurium I've ever grown from seed. And it was like a sprouted seed when I got it. It was like a little sprout. So it's not from my personal experience, but it's been said many times before that it takes like a year to get to a size that something like a crystallinum would get to in like 2 months. The seeds themselves are like little grains of salt. They're a fraction of the size of a lot of the anthurium seeds that we're normally dealing with, and they just take forever. And I would say maybe after the year mark is when you're going to see more exponential, it looking less like alfalfa sprouts. So I don't really have much advice here except just to be patient, do what you're doing. Politiflorum, as I said before, are super easy. And maybe if this makes you angry, then buy politiflorum at a established size. But Charmaine's mother plant is really narrow. It always has grown slower than my narrow politiflorum, but hers is like more needly than mine. So we've kind of toyed with the idea that maybe it's a dwarf politiflorum, so that might have something to do with it as well. I haven't seen many examples from the same seed batch. Definitely not since after they were sold, because I would have last seen them when they were being shipped. So I can't really say what other people's are doing. I would just say just to be patient, and strap leaves are kind of a pain to grow until maybe this would be the smallest size I would recommend getting one. But anything smaller than this will really test your patience. Okay, this next one, I'm gonna need you guys to maybe chime in because this person submitted this plant knowing that I have not had the best luck with this plant either. So it's a vichi. He's had it for around 4 years at this point, imported from Ecogenera, used to thrive until they had a record-breaking summer and temperatures inside went up to 33 to 35 degrees Celsius. So that is 90s Fahrenheit. In the 40s outside, no air conditioning. Where the heck do you live? And it just crashed afterwards. Ever since, it's been 2 years since that big temperature, I don't know, what would you call that, heat dome? It has been just so sad. New leaves do not seem to fully harden, and the massive crisping along the edges among its older leaves. It grows under 15-watt Sanzi bulb, which is 400 to 500 foot candles, 50 to 60% humidity in a reasonably chunky soil, normal room temperature 20 to 24 degrees Celsius. That's, I assume, 75 Fahrenheit-ish. Wait, let me just get you a actual Fahrenheit. About 68 to 77. So like very comfortable anthurium conditions. I have tried different fertilizers, but nothing seems to get it going anymore. So I know vichi hasn't been your best friend either, but was still wondering if you had any idea what was going on. So let me preface this by saying I've only ever had one vichi. No, I've had two vichi. I had a regular one, but I didn't have that for long. And then I've had a narrow vichi for quite a long time. And it is now in the afterlife because I am not very good at growing this plant and they're so slow. They're just a slow plant in general, but I think mine was particularly slow. And so when it started to decline, it was so slow to react to anything I was doing with it. And then eventually I just gave up and it perished. So it's pretty well established that vichi do well in lower humidity conditions. But this crisping on the edge does indicate to me dehydration. The way that these roots are in the pot tell me that it's been repotted before. I did ask about that. And he said that he just took it out after the crash just to check on the roots and saw that it would fit back into his normal pot. So he just put it back in. That's why there's those like pockets of air inside of the roots. So I assume it's the same substrate pre-crash versus post-crash. And I would agree that this potting situation is setting the plant up to be very difficult to overwater. Like the soil is pretty well amended, there's drainage, and the roots take up a good amount of the pot. Not too much, but it's not like a small root system swimming in a giant basin. My guess would be that it's possibly underwatered because he says he waters it when the soil is dry, so he sticks his finger in and waters if it feels dry. I would say maybe it would need to be watered a little bit more frequently. I would say that it was probably heat stress that caused it to crash, which he probably agrees. And it was probably very slow to recover from the crash because vichi are just kind of slow to do everything. So I would say maybe water it when it's a little bit less dry than currently. Like maybe let it get 50% dry or 60% dry and then water. He said currently it's not doing anything at all. It's kind of just frozen in time. There was heavy crisping before and it's just stalled. The growth point in green is not dying off, it's just frozen. So one thing I will say is when I was starting to feel like my vichi was turning around and it was actually growing is when I started to use myco on it in a combination of tree fern soil. My vichi was one of the first ones I ever tried tree fern soil on, and that was one of the ones where I was really impressed by the root growth within tree fern soil, because up until then I have found vichi to be very difficult to root, and I've seen imports of vichi that take months and months and months to show any root growth. So I don't think that's out of the ordinary for vichi, but I remember being very impressed with the root growth within tree fern soil. So if it's possible to introduce a little bit of tree fern to this pot, again, mycorrhizal fungi, and maybe increase the watering just a little bit, maybe just like dial it up by like 10-20%. And that would be my best advice, but take that with a grain of salt because I have never been good at growing vichi, and I love vichi. Like look at this leaf before it crashed. That is the stuff of dreams. I love vichi so much, especially narrow form. And whenever I see a big one, it just stops me in my tracks. It's just lights out beautiful, but I don't know if I would try again. Maybe if I ever had to restart my collection and I was starting with like barely anything, I would think about getting a vichi, because right now, I am at a place where I have more plants than I actually want in my house, so I'd have to pare it down quite a lot. But my mind always goes back to vichi, and I always feel certain kind of wistfulness when I'm thinking about vichi, because I would love to try again, but just not right now. If you guys are better at growing vichi, please feel free to let me know in the comments what has worked for you. I would guess that anything done to vichi would take quite a long time to see the results of, just because they're kind of slow, but maybe that's not the case with every specimen. Okay, so next one is a Magnificum by Zara Michelle, grown in coco peat that's buffered with, a coco peat that's buffered, and it's mixed with sphagnum moss and perlite, and it's quite big and producing spots, but I'm not sure what it is. They grow in South Africa in a greenhouse with 80% humidity year-round. And this is the beautiful, it's so pretty. The veins are so striking, and I do see the little tiny spots you're referring to. I'm trying to see if I have anything to show you. I've definitely seen this damage before on my plants, but I don't think I have a current example to pull. So they said they've been noticing these little round blotches that appear on the leaf, and they don't get larger, but eventually sometimes it becomes a hole. So I guess the spot dries out and that crispy part just kind of goes away and becomes a hole. It's presenting on majority of their anthuriums, but just in varying amounts of the spots. As of now, they believe to have 0 pests. The mix is very chunky, but they're planning to transition to pon or leca. So it's been a while since I last went on an anti-coco crusade. It's not that I'm against growing in coco coir, but I have seen that not all coco coir is created equally, or not all coco coir products are created equally, and when it's not created equally, it can really damage your plants. So I was asking if they know what kind of brand they're using, and this is a brand that is in South Africa, so I've never heard of it before, but I looked into it and they claim that the cocoa is buffered, but they also claim no chemicals added, which seems contradictory to me. So how do you buffer it without the use of chemicals? That said, I wanted to clarify if this person further buffers it at home. So they said they rinse it 3 times and then they forget the name of it, but it's a product that removes salts and adjusts pH. So I will say the thing that when I was really angry about Coco is when it wasn't that I wasn't using it in my collection, but I had people I knew was using this particular brand of Coco coir that it doesn't say that it's buffered, nor does it say that it's rinsed. And Charmaine had got some from this person and was using it on her plants, and she was seeing this kind of damage all over her plants. And it took a while for us to kind of put 2 and 2 together and realize that it was the Coco coir. I actually have a little tub of said Coco coir that I've just been keeping to maybe run an experiment. I don't even know if anyone cares. I don't even know if I really care anymore, but that said, I believe that this particular brand of Coco coir was so detrimental to plants because the salts were burning the plants, and then the unbuffered nature of it was leaching all the nutrients from the plants. So the plants were looking sickly, pale, and then they were eventually getting these really gnarly looking spots. So I don't want to say that because, okay, I wouldn't take the company as face value when they're saying it's buffered, but then they go on to say no added chemicals. So like, which one is it? I don't know. I feel a little bit wary of that claim, but then because they further rinse it at home, I would kind of rule out excess salts in this person's substrate. But with that said, what I would do, because they've already mentioned wanting to transition to pawn, and they're saying that this is happening with the majority of their collection, and I would assume that the majority of the collection is in this particular mix, I would try to transition one of the spotty plants to pawn or to leca. I would personally do pawn, and I would try to do it with like a control group of plants and then see if they start to grow healthier leaves and not show damage. And if those plants in the cocoa continue to show the plant damage. I will say that this plant, the spots on it is so mild compared to the plants that are growing in this, what I assume is very salty Coco coir. But I think just to get to the bottom of whether the cocoa is the culprit, it would be just to transition a control group. And if that doesn't change things, then it also might be a fungal issue. Here's the thing, I think the spots on the other cocoa plants were fungal spots, but it's not the fungus that's necessarily the root cause. It's a symptom of a problem that has caused a vulnerability in the plant, because we're always kind of covered in spores and bacteria anyway. So we have to be able to give those microbes the chance to attack us in order for it to actually attack us. But we have these antibodies in place, or you know what I mean? So like, I think it's more productive to control or try to help the strength of the plant, the root system, the health, rather than try to eliminate the microbes, because we can't really grow in a sterile environment. And these pathogens will always be opportunistic. So my recommendation is always to have mycorrhizal fungi in your regimen and make sure that there's some sort of additive like CalMag that builds the cell wall strength of your plants so that they're less susceptible to fungal attack, which I do think this probably is that, but it's a symptomatic of an underlying issue. That being said, this looks really mild, so I think you do have the time to do some experimentation just to, for your own peace of mind, figure out what the issue is and in your conditions. I don't think you necessarily need to physically separate them. Maybe someone wants to be super extra and separate them, but personally I would just change the substrate on a control group, but possibly just keep them in the same tent. Okay, I'm gonna end with one that is kind of like a question, a request to get tips on growing rooted chonks and getting them to start growing. What I normally do with chonks like this, I have a actual bin, let me go grab it. Maybe like a day or two before I went to Taiwan, I just grabbed a whole bunch of plants and I chopped them all up and There are some that are activated, some not quite yet. Most have something going on here. So this is my dark forgetii. This leaf I broke while I was repotting it because it was just coming out of the sheath, and I accidentally maneuvered it and broke like most of the leaf off, but it has grown out. It was growing, so it's a IKEA bin and then another IKEA bin right on top. So it's not 100% sealed, but it's mostly sealed. They're all in a mixture of tree fern and like DIY pond. There's some orchiata in here. It's all the same substrate. And there's some action on this one. There's a growth point active here. This is a different plant. This is a PAP hybrid, a lost tag PAP hybrid. I chopped up my PAP RA5 self because it wasn't doing very well in ambient. And then this whole bin lives maybe, it's under Barina lights, a 10-watt Barina T5s, and the light is maybe like an inch above the top box. So it gets pretty bright in here, and this is basically just a larger communal version of what I used to do more frequently when I was selling propagations. So I take a cutting, I'd pot it up in a pot, so I'd want it ideally to live in this pot once it starts to grow, at least for a little bit, and then I would take another of the same matching cup, put it over, tape it, and just kind of leave it like this. I would usually put it in my tent, but now I have no space in my tent, but it would be in here under this grow light. So pretty bright conditions, it's warm. And I was seeing new leaf, like a fully emerged leaf within 2 weeks. It was really quick. I was really impressed with this method. So maybe this is one way to speed it up. I'm personally not super concerned or never really thinking too much about stem rot, although I guess that does happen sometimes. I'm usually not that stressed because it's just a cutting of a plant I already have. So if it doesn't survive, then I still have the mother plant. So that's my personal kind of risk tolerance. Make sure it's not cold, but I wouldn't add additional heat to it, like a heat mat. I would not do a heat mat. And this is going to sound really repetitive, but because none of these submissions ever mention myco, not a single person say like I do myco. I assume a lot of people do, but they just didn't mention it. So I'm going to mention that I always water everything I repot with myco. The only things I don't inoculate with myco is if it has no roots at all or if it's literally just seed. But some people have mentioned that they use myco on seeds and they reported that it grows a little bit faster. I've never done it, so I can't say if that's placebo or if it's true. My understanding of myco is that it interacts with plant roots. So I don't know, but I guess it couldn't hurt. So if you haven't already inoculated, maybe that's one thing that could get it going quicker. Last thing I wanted to share is someone who sent in an update on one that was from the first episode. It's the one I did with Charmaine. It was like 2 years ago, something like that. She had asked for help on her clarinervium, and I think we were hesitant to give advice because neither of us were very confident with clarinervium, but we had advised her to put it in a different substrate, and this is what it looks like now. It looks stunning. I've never been able to grow a clarinervium that big, and look how compact it is. It even looks like, yeah, it does look like there's multiple growth points, or maybe there's 2 plants in that pot, but there's 2 emergent leaves. It's looking so nice and so healthy. But if you guys ever have updates to say that my advice worked or if it was the wrong advice, I would be more than happy to hear about it. And similarly, if you have updates on plants you've got from me and like you tag me in stories or posts, I always love to see them, because sometimes I send plants out and I'm just like, is this still alive? And this contaminated Carla that was in the previous submission, I've been thinking about that for a long time. I was wondering because I knew I sold one. I forgot where it had gone to because there's so many spreadsheets and I forgot like who it was. And I was wondering if it was still alive. I was wondering like what's this plant doing? And it's nice to actually see a little update on it. If I didn't get to your submission this time around, or if you missed the submission window, I would, I keep an eye on when I open up my submissions again, but it's not going to be for a while. I only do this once, maybe twice a year. My recommendation would be to either post it in an anthurium group, although I do recognize that it's very intimidating to post in, like, say, Anthurium addicts. I never post in Anthurium addicts. It's just way too intimidating for me. Even though you will get good, well-informed advice or opinions on any issues, another place you could post and ask for feedback is Pau and Josh's Discord. Pau and Josh are really active in their Discord, and their community is really nice. And if they're not nice, Pau does not tolerate not niceness. If you have a plant that you need help on and you want advice from like-minded individuals who are really nice, and they have friends that know a lot, certainly more than me. So I would recommend, if you don't want to do it on Facebook group, then join Pau and Josh's Discord, which I will leave a link to in the description. I don't think you need to be invited. I think you just need the link. So I will link that for you. And with that, I'm going to leave you here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to everyone who submitted their plants. I hope you guys are having a great day so far. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Mwah.